Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 236. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, September the 18th from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Well, the topic of today's podcast is kind of an offshoot of what we've been doing for the past several weeks with the whole conspiracy thing. And I'm going to tie that into what we did for several weeks before we started talking about the conspiracy theory stuff. And that has to do with UFOs, UAPs, and some of the newer players in the whole UFO world, community, neighborhood, whatever you'd want to talk about it. And the number one guy, I believe, I mean, now that so many of the pioneers are gone, Stanton Friedman, Whitley Strieber's still out there, but I would say he's semi-retired. The Hills are gone. I mean, so many of the old school UFO go-to guys and gals are not with us anymore. Linda Moulton Howe, semi-retired, but there's a new group, and many of these new people, I just can't believe. They just seem to smell like charlatans to me. Maybe because they don't really have much history. They don't have many credentials. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm a bit prejudiced towards them because I kind of like the old school guys and gals. But there's one fellow who's out there. He's been around for a while, and he's very credible in my opinion. His name is Luis Elizondo, and he was involved with government agencies. He's the real deal as far as a government employee, a soldier, heads of departments. Where it gets fuzzy is exactly what was his involvement and what was not his involvement. And if you look at many of the things that Luis Elizondo claims to have done, they're refuted by the government. However, if you listen to what his claims say, you would expect nothing less than the government to say, this guy's full of baloney because of what he said. So in the body of today's podcast, today's essay is going to be on Luis Elizondo, champion or charlatan. I'm going to give you a synopsis of what he's done, what he's doing, where he came from, and his credentials, both the stuff that is not refutable and the stuff that may be a bit fuzzy. And I'll let you make the decision as to whether or not Luis Elizondo is a UFO UAP champion or a UFO UAP charlatan. But before we get to the body of the podcast, the crux of the podcast, the essay of the podcast, a few other stories. Quick and dirty Jaguar update. As most of you know, I'm in the process, with the help of my father, restoring a 1951 Jaguar Mark 7. Basically, the car is still in media blast mode. That's not finished. I'm cleaning up parts that I've taken off of the car slowly but surely, with the day job, with the other obligations, of course. It's limited. I'm getting a little bit done here, a little bit done there. I try to dedicate my Saturdays after the podcast to this project, but then other things come up that I have to do. So slow progress, both with me and with the vendor helping me with the car. As those of you know, if you're living life, whether it's COVID related or not, but everything business is hurting. And that includes people who work on cars. They're way behind. They can't get people. They can't get fill in the blank. Okay. So that's where you are on the Jaguar, kind of slowly but surely moving because my days are full and apparently their days are full as well. Next week, I'm going to be traveling. I'm traveling about once a month now, okay, on business. I'll be also traveling with the trophy wife the end of next month to Colorado to take a look at some of the national parks that we have out in Colorado. Trophy wife's one of her goals is to see all the national parks in the country eventually, and we'll get 4 more done the end of October. But next week I'm traveling on business, flying into Chicago Midway Airport and seeing customers in southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. For those of you who are thinking about traveling, maybe you're hesitant because of the pandemic. Maybe you're hesitant because of the price. Maybe you're not hesitant because everybody's advertising cheap airline fares, okay? A few things to consider. The cheap airline fares generally, for the most part anyway, usually the cheap airline fares go from places where you don't live to places you don't want to go, okay? So when Southwest Airlines says, hey, check out our $59 fares, okay, well, plug in your city. You can't get there from here, okay? You just can't. It's places that you maybe you can fly from Waterloo, Iowa to Lincoln, Nebraska for $59, okay? Well, guess what? Nobody wants to do that, so that's why they're so cheap, because they can't fill the planes. But occasionally, you're going to have a fairly cheap fare. I got a fairly cheap fare to Midway, like $129 round trip, something like that, which that used to be about what the planes to Midway used to cost. Then they about doubled. Now they're a little bit less than that. Also for this trip to Colorado, the trophy wife and I are taking next week, $59 one way to Denver. Now coming back, it's $129, but that's okay. That's still less than $200 for a round trip to Denver, Colorado, direct flight. In that case, wonderful. We got lucky and we got some relatively cheap fares. Okay. Rental cars. There's a problem with rental cars, and I don't know what the problem is. And I'm going to go into this a little bit in detail. I had a conversation with a customer this week. We went out to dinner, and this gentleman is from Germany, and he was talking about the big problems they have with rental cars in Europe. So much so that it's hard to get a rental car. And if you do get a rental car, it's €200 a day to rent a car. Friends, that's about $260 a day to rent a car. Now, rental fees are high here in the States, but not nearly that high. And maybe they're not as high as they've been, and there's always a way around it. And let me tell you what I've done. I planned this trip to Chicago that I'm going to go on next week. I planned it many weeks ago, and I always plan my trips in advance, my business trips in advance, because you have to line up the customers, and you always have to make sure that you've got an airfare, you've got a rental car, and you've got a place to stay, okay? So you've got to coordinate all this stuff in advance, which is usually to my advantage, because if you coordinate the stuff in advance, generally the early bird catches the worm when it comes to buying travel, okay, whether it's cars, hotels, or airplane fares. So I did that, and renting a car in out of Chicago Midway Airport was $98 a day. That was for a full-size car. A lot of driving to do. Now, you may think, well, Strong, don't be such a pig and rent a compact car. Okay, the way the cars work now is lots of people want compact cars, so $98 a day gets you a full-size car. $96 a day gets you a compact car. For $3 a day, I'm going to drive the comfortable car. Thank you very much. But then last week, actually early this week, I got an email from Alamo, who I've rented from before. Normally, I rent from Enterprise. I like the way they do business. They're a St. Louis company. I like the way they do business, and usually their fares are the same as everyone else's. Well, Alamo sent me an email that says, hey, we want you back, so we will give you a free upgrade. So I'm thinking, okay, if I got to pay $100 a day for a full-size car, I may as well just go to Alamo and get a super nice car for the same price. So I looked on their website, and their cars for their full-size cars were $60 a day. I thought, wow, that's $40 a day less than Enterprise charges. So I guess I'll go ahead and just go with them. I thought, before I do that, though, let me check the Enterprise website. Now, when you go to rent a car, generally, the closer you get to the rental date, the higher the rate is to rent the car. Theory being, if you're renting a car at the last minute, you need to rent a car, and so they got you. You're going to go ahead and pay their price. I went to the Enterprise website. So with less than a week's notice to rent a car from Enterprise, $60 a day, same price as Alamo. So I canceled my $100 a day, $98 a day reservation because there was no penalty to do so. Rebooked it at $60 a day, and I got the car from Enterprise for $40 a day less. So the reason I say that is travel is just, it's on its ear. If you used to do things a certain way, understand that things have changed. Never in my 40 years of traveling have I ever seen a case where you rent a car 3 weeks in advance and then less than a week before it's time to rent the car, the price goes down. I've never experienced that. But I just did. So again, it doesn't hurt to double check. If you've got a rental car, it doesn't cost anything to cancel a reservation. So maybe just before you go on the trip, check the website again. You may save mucho dinero. I'm here in St. Louis area, so of course we don't talk about football here much because we don't have a football team. We don't talk about basketball much because we don't have a basketball team. We don't talk about college football much because the Missouri Tigers are active, but there's really no St. Louis football team. So, but we follow baseball. Okay, we're a big time baseball town, and the St. Louis Cardinals are actually playing pretty well. They played poor to mediocre until about a week and a half ago. And now it seems like they can't be stopped. They beat the Padres last night, 8-2, I think it was. They're a game ahead of the Cincinnati Reds, a game and a half ahead of the San Diego Padres for the last wild card slot. So you think to yourself, yeah, but it's the wild card slot. And yeah, but then they have to play the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are a much better team than the Cardinals. Well, the Cardinals just split a series with the Dodgers, so maybe they are, and maybe they are not. And if you remember in 2011, the last time the Cardinals won the World Series, they won 83 games. That's 4 games over 500. Their record was 83 and quick, do the math. 79, 83 wins, 79 losses. So 4 games over 500. And they won the World Series. Cardinals' record's better than that right now. Are they going to win? I don't know. Do they have a chance? Yeah, they really do. Stay tuned. The last story I want to get into before we start talking about UFOs, UAPs, Luis Elizondo, is China. And I can't get off of this China thing, mainly because the whole government of President Xi over in China, Xi Jinping, the communist dictator of China, the saber-rattling dictator of China, the liar, you can say anything you want bad about President Xi, and I'll probably agree with you because he's just a bad human being. He may be the downfall of what actually should be the world's largest economy by far. Now you think to yourself, well, what are you talking about, Strong? Why should China be the world's largest and strongest economy? 2 reasons. First of all, Chinese people are hard workers. Not that we're not, but they definitely are. And they're hard workers. They're an educated society. They have had lots of success. And they've got over 1 billion people. They've got like 1.2 billion people in their country. We've got 350 million. Okay. They've got about 4 times the people that we have. Okay. So if you've got 4 times the people, shouldn't your economy be bigger? You would think so. Okay. But here's the downfall of what President Xi is doing to his country. And this is the whole communism versus capitalism argument, that communism never wins. And if you don't believe me, send me an email, jamesstrongshow@hotmail.com.